coming. My name is Chris Tracy. I'm a Senior Project Manager at the Boston Redevelopment Authority. I want to acknowledge Maria Lanza from Mayor Walsh Office of Neighborhood Services here with us tonight, as well as Matt Conti from North End Waterfront, who's going to be filming the meeting. We are here for a pre-filed impact advisory group meeting for the proposal at Parcel 9 Haymarket Hotel. I'll touch a bit upon the history of this proposal and how it's come through. Many of you remember in October of 2014, we went through the Article 80 large project process with the BRA. We had an IAG meeting, we had a public meeting, both at City Hall and our boardroom. Those were publicly advertised meetings. And we were encouraged with how that process went, but we never brought it to our board for approval because they sought a planned development area, which I can touch on more in a moment, but they weren't ready to submit their application for a planned development area at the time. So our thought process was that although the Article 80 process went well, we weren't ready to bring them to the board, and we mutually agreed upon this with the proponent, that we weren't going to bring them to the board until they went through the PDA process as well. And if the PDA process, when they did come through it, went well, we're going to bring it to our board with a recommendation for approval for both the Article 80 large project and the planned development area. Okay? So a planned development area is their approach to zoning for the site. A planned development area is a pretty common approach at the BRA with projects of this size. And when a site is eligible for a PDA, an applicant submits a application for a PDA. Our zoning attorneys thoroughly go through it to make sure it fits all the requirements that are needed to approve a PDA. And we also have this robust public process to see how the community feels about it before we'll approve the PDA. So we're here in a pre-file stage tonight. We're here to show you and give you a heads up that this is coming down the pipeline. We expect to receive this PDA in the near future. When we do, we will kick off a robust process that includes a 45-day open public comment period, an IAG meeting that we will publicly advertise, and then a public meeting that we'll obviously publicly advertise as well. We'll continue to monitor the comments that come in through the public comment period. We'll see how those meetings go. We'll work with our local elected officials in the North End and downtown, and then we'll make a determination on whether we think it's ready to bring to our board for approval or not, or whether we think it needs more process. In the meantime, since October of 2014 and now, the proponent has done some outreach with the state, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They've reached out to Mass DOT, reached a development agreement with Mass DOT, and we feel that we are ready for them to come back and submit the PDA with the BRA. There is some more dialogue that needs to happen with some state agencies and some other concerned agencies in the Commonwealth and in this area. So we're prepared to do that, the proponent's prepared to do that, but at this point we've told them that we're comfortable with them filing the PDA and going through the process. The site is now PDA eligible, and that's a change from the last time around. The Boston Zoning Commission took a vote to make it PDA eligible. So again, when they're ready, we're going to go through this process. I'm going to pass out a sign-in sheet shortly. I ask that you all leave your email address on it. If you don't, leave your phone number. That's how we're going to communicate with you all going forward, and that's how we're going to invite you to future meetings. At this time, I'd just like to ask if there's any IAG members in the room, could you just raise your hand and identify yourself? Phil?
Phil Frederoli, North End Neighborhood Waterfront Council.
Otto Galato, Haymarket Push Card Association.
So the way this meeting's going to function tonight is I'm going to hand it over to the development team in a moment, ask that they introduce their whole team, ask them to give an update as to where it's at. They can talk about what to expect in this process. I don't think we have a whole set of slides to go through tonight, and that's not uncommon for this stage because they're still working out how that PDA application is going to look. But again, once we have that first meeting, while they're officially under review, you'll be able to see all the slides. I'll put the whole filing up on our website for all to see. That will be a public document. And then when they're done, with their brief presentation, we'll open up to the IAG for any comments they may have. When the IAG is done, we'll open it up to the public at large for any comments they may have. Okay? At this point, I'll hand it over to the team, ask you to introduce your team, and then jump in.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. Good evening. My name is Cayman O'Mara. I'm with Harbinger Development with the development ownership team, which also includes Normandy Real Estate Partners. They're not here tonight, but I'd also like to introduce you to Mel Schuman, who's our attorney for the project, permanent counsel, legal attorney. Council Robert Brown with Perkins and Will, our architect. Thanks, Chris. You know, a broader update on the project, but I think this meeting will be relatively brief tonight because we aren't going to go through a whole slideshow on the project, but in terms of what's on the wall here and where we are and how we got to this point, and then also talk about the next steps. We did file our project in October of 2014, so that's quite a while ago. We went through a lengthy public process, which was preceded by a very lengthy public RFP process. And we've met in this room a number of times. We have a lot of relationships in the community, and that really evolved through a very robust public presentation process, including a vote from NUNIC, a vote from the BCDC, meeting with community groups, butters, working closely with the Haymarket Pushcart Association. We have a signed agreement with the Haymarket Pushcart Association to be part of the bottom of the building. That all led to this project, and really what you're seeing here is the culmination of all that. So there's been a lot of public input. At this point, we are looking at a change to the design to some degree. We have a letter from the Massachusetts Historic Commission, MHC, who has suggested that the height of the hotel portion be lower. And so Perkins and Will is looking at that right now. What we'd like to do is probably spend another couple of weeks with the architects to change the shape of the building a little bit and look at the recommendations from MHC, and then get back together with our IAG to have a workshop session to basically look at that revised design. Once we've gone through that process, that's what will advance through the PDA. You know, our objective, because this has been such a long process, this is so strongly supported by so many, but we'd like to make some changes that we'd like to not have, you know, the look of the building or the intent of the building change too much. I can say that, you know, the components of the Haymarket Pushcart Association, our commitments to them, our retail components as part of the market district, the hotel and the hotel rooms and the program, all of that will remain. We feel great about the project. We love the parcel. We have a lot invested in the project, but we feel that it's important to respond to that MHC letter and look at reducing the height of the building, of the hotel component, even withstanding the support we have. So, you know, I would just say that, you know, we'll be back to you once we have a redesign, after we've had a chance to talk with our IAG about what that looks like, and also meet with the BRA and Mass DOT about that design. And then, you know, we'll continue until we're completed, and then we'll file for our PDA.
Yeah, and the idea around tonight was to be more of a listening session, as opposed to showing you a lot of images, because the design is still being worked out on what they're going to back.
I do just have one question though. I'm a little taken back. I didn't know if it was the right size though. The hotel part that you were talking about, having been home. When did that happen?
Well, the hotel portion, let me just sort of describe a little bit in context.
Hey, let me just, so you understand, I thought you were talking about the left side of the building being lower. The low side.
Yeah.
Now you're telling me that the North Street side is going to be lower too?
Yeah, we have a letter from MHC that suggests we should lower the height of the hotel portion.
And that was at 103 feet?
Right, and we're gonna look at that right now, and we're gonna spend a couple of weeks with our architects to look at that, and then get back with the IAG.
It's news to you, it's news to us today. We saw the letter today for the first time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we got the letter about 3 hours ago. And, you know, we think it's important. You know, they're an important part of the process, and they are, they've been following the process for quite a long time, and we're gonna look at that.
People in this community have been urging you since the October 14 to look at that. And I think you're misrepresenting this community when you say that you've got such a lot of support. The building that you've been talking about is not the one that was approved. It's shot up and expanded a great deal.
Yeah, I think the heights, the Central Artery Joint Development Guidelines recommend a height of 65 feet along Blackstone Street for the parcel, okay? And the community process that led to the RFP2 said what we'd like to potentially see is lower than 65 feet in exchange for some higher height on the left. We followed a process of an RFP. We've tried to attend every public meeting that we've been asked to attend and have. So I'm not necessarily representing, I mean, not everyone's going to support a project. You know, we think this is a great project. We now are responding to the MHC to look at reducing that height on that side.
Good. I wish you'd responded sooner because the community has been trying to draw this problem to your attention for a long time.
Okay.
Eamon, may I ask, is that the letter dated January 8th?
Yes.
It says, I don't see anything in the letter that specifies the hotel. It says that the entire project is,
But it talks about the height of the
What were you
project.
asking?
It talks about the height of the project exceeding the guidelines.
Exceeding the guidelines.
The portion that exceeds the guidelines is the
yeah,
hotel.
but I thought you said that they had told you to reduce it by 1 story?
I didn't say that.
You didn't say that.
No, I just said, they suggested that we look at the height. They point out in their letter that the Joint Development Guidelines have a recommended height of 65 feet along Blackstone Street. We're higher than that. That was in exchange for making it 27 feet on the right-hand side, which is what the community wanted through the RFP process, which launched RFP number 2. We responded to that. In exchange for lower heights on the right, we went for higher heights on the left. We're now going to look at reducing the left-hand side. And we're going to work that design and come back.
Anybody else want one of these?
So Victor, I know you're a bit late. I said at the beginning, you know, this is more of a listening session than anything else. This is a pre-file meeting, as you know.
Yeah.
They're still working on that feedback from those state agencies that I believe you saw the letter on.
Yeah.
When they finalize that design, we'll obviously re-engage you as an IAG in that public process and go through that robust process for the PDA approval.
Is it possible to get questions answered?
Yeah, absolutely. But
The ones that I emailed today?
well, what I'm saying is this is the beginning of the PDA process. But if you have questions tonight, you can absolutely ask myself or the team.
Also, I think, Victor, and in fact, I got your email from earlier and those questions, and we can certainly talk about those things. What I mentioned earlier was the public process that we had as part of the RFP, the public process that we had after the RFP, leading up to where we are. And we're now responding to the MHC letter, and we're going to look at a redesign on the hotel portion on that section of the building. And we'll look at the whole project a little bit. But what we want to try to do is keep the intent of what BCDC so embraced, but we're going to respond to the MHC letter.
Okay, questions?
Sure, go ahead, Victor.
Okay, the first question, let me ask the first ones to Chris Tracy, to the DRA, and then give Eamon a little breathing time. In the last letter that I wrote to you in September, I asked 3 or 4 things. One was a scoping determination ever made?
On this process?
On this
No.
project?
No.
No.
We
Okay.
went through Article 80, large project. We had an IAG meeting, public meeting that were publicly advertised with a 30-day comment period. We were encouraged with how the process went, but as you know, we never brought it for our board to approval because we wanted them to go through the PDA process. Then, if we were satisfied with that process, we're going to bring them concurrently to our board with a recommendation for approval.
Isn't there going to be a scoping determination made before it goes to the board? That's
That's-
part of Article 80. It's a requirement, is it not?
That doesn't always happen in my experience.
Right,
Yes.
What would happen is there would be, we would hope, and depending upon the DRA's
judgment, and hopefully the community supported the project, they would issue a scoping determination or authorize a scoping determination waiving further review at the same time that we went to the board for the PDA approval.
But that would start with, that would include a scoping determination. The waiver is of further review, not of the scoping determination, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we will expect at some point a scoping determination. I hope.
A scope waiving further review, I'm sorry.
Maybe you should repeat it.
Well, I mean, I think,
Wait.
why don't we let, you know,
Well, okay.
Chris can speak with the area, but.
All right. The next thing is we are an IAG and we're interested in impacts. And so far, the public benefits have been a community room, a fitness room, potentially a pool. Are there any others that the BRA thinks we ought to have or that the community thinks we ought to have? Restrooms, for example?
Well, we never actually drafted a board memo on it. The idea was, we will formulate a community benefits package to seek mitigation efforts of possible impacts of this project as we go through this 45-day comment period. Obviously, we will share that with you all and get your input on what you want to see on that.
Well, I mean, I would also just add, you know, in addition to those sort of conventional, traditional public benefits, of course, we're spending about $2.1 million for the reconstruction of Blackstone Street with our own equity, okay? The leveling of the street, utilities, water, lights, and we're also supporting the Haymarket Pushcart Association with free space for 99 years, including the build-out of space, plus bathrooms and offices for them, in addition to the public benefits. We also, at the very end, sort of near the completion of the Arctic Lady process, we committed to funding an annual amount to the North End Beautification Program, which I think you're aware of. So there's actually a long list of items, and we're very happy about that.
And to put it briefly, we would absolutely put together a community benefits package, share that with you all, get your input before we brought them to the board. We wouldn't bring them to the board without robust community benefits.
The final question is on the waiver. What would be being waived, if you do suggest that, is a draft project impact report? In other words, would that be the next step if we went through the full steps?
You know, we haven't determined what the next steps will be. Obviously, we need to go through that process of the PDA, then we will determine the next steps.
We did file an expanded PNF, which is a PNF that is broadened to include the type of analysis that would normally go with the project impact report.
But again, we haven't
Yes,
made
but there are no comment letters in expanded PNF. That would need to be answered.
The public was invited to comment, and comments.
We had a comment period and received comment letters.
Yeah, but the answers or responses to the comment letters haven't been shown. In other words,
we never brought it to the board. We haven't made a decision whether we're going to bring it to the board.
responses to comment letters occur before it goes to the board, because the board needs to have an understanding of what the public comments are.
Sure. And we have not brought them to the board. We have not made a decision on when we're going to bring it to the board. All we've given.
I think we're going around in circles.
No, I don't think so. The whole process that we're undergoing and have been undergoing since then and are continuing tonight is to respond to comments of the community and other concerns of the community. So,
Yes.
So that's what this is
But
all
not
about.
written responses.
We haven't done written responses to those comments, that's correct.
Can we get to my email of today, which asked for clarification on several things, one of which is the height that's now being proposed for the low market home. And I
Yeah, I got your
gave
email.
you two drawings.
Yeah.
One of them was the original drawing that you filed with your bid.
Yeah.
And the next one
Yes.
was the drawing that you gave me a week or so ago.
Right.
Which, as you explained when we met, removed the second story. But it looks as though the first story has been increased to the height where the second story used to be. Can you address that?
Sure. When you and
It's
I
on the front
met,
page, right there.
and
Right here.
I'm going to the section, I understand. I gave you these. We produced them. And you can see the end of it, I guess. What's shown here in this section is the roof line of the roof from when we won the RFP. And then this is the roof line of the current design as shown in that rendering. And I think what you're asking, because you know the design has changed. I mean, some is lower, some is higher. It's essentially a sort of one-story roof component. But I think to your point, and our response to that was, instead of having a two-story space, to make it more of like a vaulted 1.5-story space as seen in this rendering, which is what's shown here. And I think what you're asking about is, why is this point lower than that point?
No, no. What I'm asking is if you'll turn to the first page, why it doesn't look like the document that you filed with your bid. That is, you said, this is what we're going to build if we get the bid. Right?
This roof line is
Yep.
what's traced over the current roof line.
Mm-hmm.
And there's
a
the
20
slightest variation on them.
And there's a 20-foot dimension on that document.
That's what I was just discussing with you, which is that this 20-foot here is this lid on the roof line. It was determined that instead of having the roof come out and go like this and point down, which is like low, that point is so important at North Street, at the Freedom Trail, that it should be a little more gracious than having it just drop down to this little point with this little door. So we try to flare it up, but what I'm trying to show you in this drawing, Victor, which we looked at together at Cafe Paradiso, is that the roof line generally is consistent with where we were before. It varies up and down. In fact, it's lower than than it was before. But the objective that I think you were seeking, which we like too, is that that's one large open space. So if are you asking me about whether this is too
No, I'm
high?
asking you why there's a hump in the middle of what you're now proposing as a reduced market hall building, where there was not a hump in the middle with the proposal that you made on which you...
This part went
won
up,
the
that
bid.
part went down. It goes up and down. We're trying to do, I think also
Can
part of
everyone
this-
see what I'm pointing out? There's a hump in the middle.
Well, right, we're
We
trying to make-
can't see
we're-
anything.
Well, on
There's
the
no graphics.
on the page.
We're trying to make, well, we're trying to make a market hall, okay? Just the main objective. And what we're trying to achieve is a space inside that's great, which is something that we've all agreed on with the IAG, which is a great objective that makes it like the market hall in the market district. We reduced the height from the skylight, which in the earlier scheme was sort of this bulging skylight. But we kind of went lower there and went higher into the area where the public space is. And the mean average, which you can't see, Dave, but you're
Is there any reason why you couldn't show us what you're talking about?
Because we don't have a slide of that.
You don't have any slides at all of what you're talking about?
No, because we, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we're here for a pre-bid discussion. We got a letter about 4 hours ago from MHC that said we think the building should be lower on the back. We're gonna look at a redesign with our architects and come back.
So
We don't want to go through a slideshow and show you a project that we're not looking for vote any
So
longer.
rather than show you a stage in the design that's changing, we thought we would open it up, get your thoughts and comments, and come back with a revised design that would reflect what we
Yeah.
actually are going to proceed with, or seek approval of.
Do you have copies of your original design that won the RFP?
I think I gave it to you.
Okay.
That's the first page in the package. And the second page in the package shows the developer's proposal
Yeah, so
for,
if you look at this
This
is
is
what
the
we,
original.
this is the original.
This.
This is the
Okay.
original. This is, this 8-story building with the market hall component, and that roof line is what Victor and I are discussing. If you can see this dashed line, and you see the bump right here, that's that bump. And so what we did is we now have this shape, which is like the different, and Victor's saying, why is it sort of rising in here while it's dropping here? And this is a slightly different detail. We're trying to have the same intent, which is that it's a sort of 1-story market hall, or some kind of vaulted space. And now we're focusing on the whole mass, based on an MHC letter, we're gonna respond to that. Oh, sure.
So we don't have an answer.
What's your question again?
The question is, why is there a bump in the middle of the revised plan, which was not in the original plan on
Because we
which
think
your
it makes
bid was
better
awarded?
architecture and a market hall.
So,
I don't know what,
and to give you a
It
different
has to
little
do
bit
with
of
view
answer.
corridors, you know what it has to do with.
But it has to do with more than that, because the original design was a preliminary design, and it's subject to review by a whole bunch of parties, including you, but also including the VRA, the BCDC, Mass DOT, a whole bunch of parties. There are all sorts of code requirements and the like that also have to be considered. And through that whole process of review, we revised the design of the project, but tried to stay true to the spirit of what was presented. And I think we did that. You may disagree. but
Yes,
I think.
Okay, well, that's fine.
Because view corridors have been an important impact from the beginning. We are an impact advisory group. Impacts to view corridors have been a fundamental, preservation of view corridors has been a fundamental objective. And this does not preserve the view corridor that your original bid would have provided.
It's lower in some areas. That's my point, what you're missing. But also, I think it's also important for everyone to understand too, is that the design, this design right here is a change even from what we have approved for BCDC, that we had approved at Nunick, and that we have strong support for, which actually is a two-story point. So this is lower than what we've already promoted through Article 80. So we said, we were essentially trying to go back to that roof line. And when I compared them, they shift and vary. And Victor, to be honest, in some parts they're lower. All I'm saying is that this is actually a lower volume than was already approved by BCDC and Nunick and the Boston Landmarks Commission in writing and in vote. So we're actually reducing it even beyond what we already have support for and approval for and votes for. So I'm trying to get back to the intent, which we kind of agree with. We think the one-story vaulted hall is better than having a second floor in there. We used to have a second floor slid in there and they bumped the roof even higher. So just to be fair, when you and I met at Paradiso 2 weeks ago, I said, look, we're going to reduce the height down to this.
Yes.
And look, they're so similar. Keep in mind is that it was at 2 stories before that. So that's...
I don't think they're similar.
Well, I know, but there's certainly less...
There's a bump
Does anyone have an
that
opinion
wasn't
on
there
this?
before.
But there's a bump here,
Yes.
and this one there's a bump here, so it's, what's the difference between a bump here and a bump there?
Well, I think,
Are you an architect? I mean,
I'm not an architect.
The
I'm a
point
member
is,
of the
what
public and
is
a member of
the
IAG.
impact?
Come on.
Is there a difference in impact between the original design and the current design? And the only way we'll see that, the only way the public can appreciate that difference is for there to be graphics showing from a point of reference in the north end,
Right.
looking towards the Blackstone block, the views.
Right.
And hopefully you'll bring
We've
both
done, and
with
we've
you.
done that for the last year and a half.
With the current design?
With the current and the larger one. The 2-story building, which is what we went through Article 80, which we had the IAG meeting, which we went through BCDC, Boston Landmarks, and Nunick, had a 2-story glass
Yes,
building,
I remember that.
as you probably recall. We're reducing that,
I get it,
and we're trying to get as close to the original line.
right?
We think that the roof line is important as it relates to the market components and the old roof lines that used to carry through Blackstone Street where they covered under. So that varying roof line is an architectural
Have you
importance. So
shown-
therefore, it isn't necessarily.
Have you shown the view difference between what this community and other communities supported back during the MassDOT process and what you're currently, what the current design is? Have you shown that? If you haven't, I'm asking that you bring that information,
Well,
those graphics, into the public process
Right.
over the next few months.
Well, that's why I think it's all kind of, you know, I think we're happy to, this is great to have a dialogue.
I'm just
But the reality is we're gonna come up, we're gonna modify the design.
So what you're suggesting is when we have the modified design, you want to see the difference between
Yeah.
that design and the.
Right.
Unless it's all,
Preliminary.
well, okay, so you're saying you're further gonna you're gonna change the design of the market area
We
as
don't
well
know.
further?
We're gonna look at the whole
Okay.
thing.
All right.
But it's clear to us that that view corridor is important, so that image, that rendering will obviously make sure that that's well represented.
That view has always been required. It was required in the RFP, it was required in the Article 80, it was required in the expanded notification form. All of those views from Hanover Street, from the north end, looking back at the Blackstone block and at Haymarket have always been there. And I think what Victor urged us was the project that we had gone through Article 8 with, and as I mentioned, approved in those fronts, had a 2-story taller piece, and we went back to the 1-story. I think we should do is we should wait until we've looked at what the massing of the hotel's gonna look like and and then come back and we can look at those same views again, including the view from Market Hall.
Thank you.
Sure.
It's good feedback, though, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I think the only, it's just, it's been such a long process, as you know, because you've been in from the beginning, so has Victor. Many of us have been, from RFP 1 to community study process. And this goes back to 2008. RFP 1, which we were involved with, then this 2-year public study process, then RFP 2, which we were obviously involved with, and then won that. And then the Article 80 process, and all of these things have come up, and we continue to show those things. And I think we're responding primarily to those view corridors, and always have. That's really why the building's higher on the left and lower on the right.
Correct.
Because the joint development guidelines say 65 feet straight across, you'd have a monolithic block. If you do what the joint development guidelines say, you're gonna have a monolithic block from left to right. There'll be no view corridor. So we said, okay, we'll push the building down on the right in exchange for right and left, which was the community recommendation to DOT. So we just followed the RFP. Now we're saying, okay, we're still going to achieve those things, but we're going to now look at lowering the building on the left. So we just keep going.
And I apologize if folks are a little let down that we don't have more images to show tonight, and if you felt like you were going to see more, then we'll take responsibility for that. The whole idea of this meeting was just a heads up to the IAG that this was coming back. We put it up on our calendar because we want to be as transparent as possible. But we knew tonight would be more of a heads up and more of a discussion than a thorough presentation of plans.
Yeah.
How high is that building?
I'm sorry?
How high is the tall one?
The tall building, this is 8 stories, then 10 stories.
103
It's 84 feet, and I mean, what I had looked forward to describing tonight was how we changed this one even. So the front facade of the building is set back from the greenway. What we had approved in Article 80 was a flush building. We set it back. We also had approved a straight 10-foot building. We went at 8 foot, we cut it back, set it back, and put garden up there to create some shape and to set the heights back a bit and push it away from the greenway. And then we reduced the front of the market hall down from a 2-story to a 1-story.
So how high is it?
It's 103 feet and 84 feet. 103 feet.
The bulk of the building is 84 feet high, 8 stories, but then they have a couple of additional floors that are set back on more than one side that brings that section up to 103 feet.
That sounds like it's a little taller than 65 feet.
It is.
Or 55 feet for the north end. That's not 65.
And that's what MHC is saying too.
It is, but as you
How
recall,
did the DRA accept that?
We haven't made a determination that we're going to accept it yet. We need to go through this process and see how the community and all these other agencies feel about it. But they're seeking a planned development area which would dictate the height.
But if I can reiterate what Eamon said, that when the 65 feet was considered, it was considered to go across the entire site, so that you would in effect end any view corridors from the north end of the Blackstone block, because it would be a monolithic building that could be as high as 65 feet or 55 feet on a portion of it across the entire block. So as a result of a very long process during the RFP process with MassDOT and review by the neighborhood, it was determined that it would be better for the community and for everyone if one side of the site was pushed down and the other side was pushed up. And that's the reason the hotel piece on the side that that is tall is higher than 65 feet. And the portion where the market is far lower than 65 feet. And that was the result of the input from the community during that process.
I still don't understand that, didn't you, in your request for bids, did you award it? That's the right word. Award it on the basis of that 65?
Well, it was the Mass DOT that awarded it. It was not awarded on the basis of the project being 65 feet. It was awarded based upon a project that was 8 stories on one side, potentially going up higher, and 1.5 stories on the market side.
So that's what this 53.5 means, that it's the average of
For the bulk.
103 and something else?
Yes,
That's what it is?
yes.
Okay.
Could be.
So was the bid awarded to a project that you submitted based on the bid specifications? It sounds like it wasn't.
No,
It was.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when a bid, so you bid on a project and you won the bid, and this, what were the specifications of the bids? They were 103 feet,
No.
the height?
No.
84.
What was, who actually put out the bid to build something on this parcel?
Massachusetts Department of Transportation, which owns the land.
They own the land, so they submitted a bid, they advertised a bid.
They looked for
a project.
requests for proposals.
Request for proposals, but they, in the request for proposals, they must have outlined the height of the building that they were looking for. That's part of the bid process.
Correct.
Correct.
So when you submitted your proposal, did it meet those bid specifications?
Yes.
Yeah, Dave
Yep.
calls all this.
Yeah, we went through years of public process to come up with design guidelines, as you say, specifications.
Yeah.
And they submitted a proposal that met the design guidelines and was the preferred project by MassDOT and by some of us here as well. And so they were awarded the project
Yeah.
because, in part because they met the design guidelines.
So what was the height of the?
84 feet, I think, or roughly 84 feet. It was only after they went into the BRA process that everything got mucked up. And they ended up at 103 feet instead of 84 feet. And the market for a while there was 2 stories instead of 1 story. So everything changed when it moved from the years-long productive MassDOT process into the BRA process, my opinion.
So how could MassDOT submit a request for proposals that was higher than the lawful height of a building in that district?
Well, they were able to do it because they were simply awarding a project that would then have to go through
Yeah.
the Article 80 process and the zoning process and all of that.
Right.
You're right, that maybe somewhere in those processes, that project comes to a halt. And in fact, the MHC is raising serious concerns.
Yes.
So
I think
MassDOT
that's-
only did it
yeah.
as that they felt that this was the best project for the land that they owned, knowing that they would have to get
That they-
zoning relief.
Right.
I assume they have to get zoning relief. Now, they're a state agency.
Right.
No, we
Are they
do
required?
have, we do have to get zoning relief.
Okay.
But just to put a little further gloss on it, MassDOT did that only after an extensive process of
Agreed.
community review, and did that to reflect the views of the community. It's not as though MassDOT, in its wisdom, said this is the way it should be, like it or leave it.
And there was a consensus
Right.
by practically everyone involved in that process that having the building be higher than 55 feet at one end and lower, substantially lower than that at the other end, was appropriate.
Right.
That's exactly it. And that
Yeah.
Dave puts it better than I do, I guess. That's what we've been following, and that's what we advanced.
Right.
And that's why, and after the award process, there was the Article 80, and that's what we went through. And that's where there was support to a certain point, and now we have MHC saying, and First Victor
In the
pointing out
community.
the point, and now MHC talking about this in the community. And
Right.
so we're saying, okay, well, we're gonna look at that now. We're gonna change the height of the building there. But what Dave described is sort of, I think, is perfect in terms of the length and the process. And recommended, the other thing is that the joint development guidelines have what are called recommended heights. And they actually have a lot of language in there that allow for flexibility from the community, allow for design flexibility, really, which is what opened it up. The 2-year process where the community said, well, we don't want to have a 65-foot block. They said, and that's where that feedback came. The DOT issued an RFP saying what we'd like to see is lower here. In exchange, the community's open as in exchange for height of the left. You still got to go through Article 80 and see what happens. You know, so here we are. I think another important fact is that during Article 80, we had an issue with we had a full basement under half the site. And the global warming, new climate zoning issues required that we take all of our mechanical equipment out of the basement. Didn't seem like such a big deal initially, but it all went on the second floor. That ended up displacing 8 hotel rooms on the second floor. That's when we started thinking about, well, maybe we could put another floor on. You know, and before we filed, we presented a 10-story building. Before we filed at all, we were at North Bennett Street School, and we showed the 10-story building. We talked with the IAG, we talked with certain people who are close with, like Otto and Victor, about that. Said, this is what we're gonna promote. And so we were very open about it all. But there were reasons for that, and you know, now we're gonna look at this further.
I have a question. Oh, I'm sorry, Diana.
No, no, I'm all set, thank you.
Is what I'm seeing on the screen now a further revision of the 10-story hotel, or is this the?
Yes, that's a further revision, and it's really, I think it's, I mean, we love this building, and I think it's gonna get
The
better
setback
too,
on the roof.
but basically the setback, Victor, on the front facade, I don't know if you can see it, but on the greenway, that used to be flush, and we set it back away from the greenway by 12 feet, okay, approximately. And then on the short end, we set that all back at the 8 stories to create that 8-story massing, to create some lower heights, push the building away from the greenway, and also kind of create some sculptural edges to it, so it's not just a sort of a block. But we think that was a real positive. We were looking forward to saying, you know, and I think we're probably going to stick with that sort of massing. But those are improvements, Victor, you know, to the greenway.
Did it expand out on the other 2 sides, or is this smaller than the original full story?
You know, it's hard to say to compare the 2 floor plates.
Well,
You know,
this is a smaller floor plate
Smaller
than
floor plate,
the
okay.
8-story.
right, a smaller footprint than the 8-story building. Yeah, the 8-story building has a slightly longer floor plate than the 10-story building. It's kind of compressed.
Can you explain to me what this quote means from the expanded project notification form? As currently contemplated, the project will be 10 stories with a zoning height not to exceed 115 feet. What is the 115 feet you were talking about when you filed these?
I think the PDA envelope, which is 115 feet, I think was essentially just to allow for mechanical or override or other, just so it wouldn't be too tight. At the time, we were thinking a 103-foot building, and we wanted to make sure we had, you know, we didn't bump up against that at all. So we just, you know, we're not using all of that, but that's what the 115 feet is for.
Well, we'd of course like to know what the final height is going to be.
Well, the final height right now is 103 feet. Now, but we're
Well,
changing it.
Where is?
The way the
What
zoning
was
code
going
works
to
is
bring
the height
it
is,
to 115
the height is measured to the top of structure of last occupied floor. So that's the standard way to determine heights. I mean, you look at some old buildings, they have huge mechanical and water towers, and then you have new buildings that are tight. Sometimes you have buildings with mechanicals in the basement and they're flat. So the height that we're talking about, 103, is the top of structure of the last occupied floor.
But this uses the term zoning height, and I thought.
Zoning height refers generally, not always, but generally to the height the top of the last occupied.
That's what I thought.
As a minimum.
But the height being designated here is 115. Why?
It was because we were still in the design stage, we weren't sure where it was gonna end up. And so it was to account for the possibility it might be taller. As it turned out, this program came in at 103, and as it turns out further, we're coming back with a shorter building. So it's really an academic question at this point. But that was the reason. That was the reason.
You have a future date?
We're gonna
I
let
think,
them-
I mean, I don't know, what do you think, Robert? I mean, you know, again, to be completely honest, we got an MHC letter about 4 hours ago, now, whatever it was. And, you know, we've been going back and forth with them a bit. We didn't want to not have the meeting, but we, you know, in all likelihood are not going to be promoting that building exactly. So we didn't want to go through a whole slideshow of that building. So we're going to take, to answer your question, 2 weeks, Otto.
Okay.
We don't set a requirement on them, we're gonna let them consider the feedback and then when they're ready.
With
2 weeks or
With
so.
the pictures involved, you'd have more feedback from the community and actually seeing.
When we have a design that we're comfortable with proceeding with, we'll have those.
So
drawings
he said 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks.
Next 2 or 3 weeks. What I was thinking, I'm not sure about the
You guys
what
just feel
exactly.
comfortable with what you're doing
Right.
and then present it.
Exactly.
I'm not sure exactly what is the approach, but there's an IAG, and we could have a workshop. Kind of what I was thinking, and then we would have sort of a bit of a public rollout. If everyone wants to be, and I'm happy to be with everybody. I don't care what you want to do. But I was thinking we could have it not fully refined and finished, but we could look at. We still have to satisfy our program. We have our project and the underwriting, the economics of that, and how we make that hotel work and how we make the retail work in the HPA space. But we could have more of just a session with the IAG, and then right thereafter, quickly come and do this meeting again and say, look, this is what we're looking at now. And, I don't know, we just have to get, what do you say, Robert? Turn the machines on.
We're gonna need at least 3 weeks. No way we're gonna come back.
There's your answer.
The precision that you guys need and the dimensional nature that you have to require in 2 weeks.
The worst thing we could do is waste your time, so give us enough time
This
to
is
do it right.
This took
Yeah.
18 months to put this together. 4 different designs, 18 months. Those renderings take 3 or 4 weeks each. So to get to this level is impossible in 3 weeks.
So Robert,
We
we
can
can
certainly identify.
three
where
weeks
we're-
with the IAGs and after that. for
Yeah,
the-
yeah.
Is that fair?
It's gonna be.
I think it's optimistic because if you look carefully at MHC's letter, the letter is addressed to the Federal Highway Administration, and it reminds the Federal Highway Administration that they must initiate a public process. So it seems that the ball is in their court, and of course in yours, to work with them.
There are different processes. That's one of them. We're going to continue on parallel tracks. This process with the city will
Okay.
obviously have to deal with the state and the feds at some point as well. Hopefully sooner rather than later.
You said earlier that the new design would be less tall than this one, is that correct? And is that set in stone? Are you doing that in response to the letter that came today?
I think it will be,
You think it will be?
yes.
And is that because of the letter that you got today?
Well, yeah, primarily, and, you know, your feedback and.
I wrote a year ago to Chris Tracy about this. I haven't gotten an answer yet. So the BRA doesn't care.
We're responding, MHC is very important, obviously, as it relates to getting this all completed, and we have strong support for the 10-story building. We have approvals for the 10-story building. I mean, I understand you don't like it, but I'm just saying, we're now adjusting, and I think it will be lower. The fact is that we already had a BCDC vote, a Newnick vote, Boston Landmarks vote for a 10-story building, but we're looking at what we want to try to achieve here, which is to make the best building possible. We want to get the project done. We want to complete the process. We want to build the building. We want to improve Haymarket. We want to improve Market District, Blackstone Street, get this thing done. I mean, this has been a long time. So ownership is saying, I own 40% of this project. And we're saying we want to, you know, deal with that, change that, lower that height, and get this done.
You don't have to answer any of the points I'm about to raise, but I hope that they will be addressed in the remaining process. They fall into 4 categories. The first is the IAG. The IAG is supposed to be a fairly large group that represents the various communities potentially impacted by by the project. And what I'd like to know is, and again, I don't need to know it tonight because it's kind of rhetorical, and yet I think it's important. How many members were there at the beginning of the Article 80 process? How many members are there today who can actually participate today, not tonight, but currently participate? And how many of those are here tonight? It was my understanding that the IAG was originally much bigger than the group that's here tonight, and I think there's certain neighborhoods that aren't even represented tonight. And maybe shame on those IAG members for not being here, but still it means that communities are underrepresented in this process. So I hope that there are many more IAG members, and if there aren't enough available at this time, if many of them have fallen by the wayside, then they should be replaced in this process.
Can I?
Sure.
That? So I took the project over from a different project manager. There are about 6 or 7 names that were given to us. We went through our standard process to ask the local elected officials if they have nominations. Every local elected official is allowed to give us 2 names. An IAG can be up to 15 people. From what I understand, we only got 6 or 7 responses. There are 3 here tonight. We reached out to all 6 or 7 to invite them tonight. Obviously, only 3 came. We're going to keep engaging that list. We'll consider your request that perhaps new people need to be reached out to if we feel that's appropriate.
I can answer it. There are 6 on the list. 6.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'd also just offer up, Dave, that during Article 80, we did go to Nunick, and we had a vote, and we had a full presentation. I asked Victor a number of times if he wanted us to go to New Ruh, and he didn't think that was necessary, but I think what we could do is we certainly will come back to New Ruh.
Yeah, well, I think it's very inappropriate for any community organization, including the neighborhood council, to vote on a design that has not yet gone through the public process. The public process is not over. Nunick should not have voted in support of this project until that happened. And that's probably the reason Nura chose not to vote. On the design
Can I
issue.
push back a little bit on that, because one of the whole points of the public process is to get the input of neighborhood groups.
Input is one thing, a
No, but-
vote
but-
is
but
something
traditionally-
totally different.
Traditionally, in many projects throughout the city, neighborhood groups vote on whether they approve of the project because they want to inform the BRA or the other public agencies that are involved in approving the project of whether they think the BRA and those other agencies should vote yay or nay on it. So they're trying to express their opinion.
They don't, Nunick didn't even have the information on the public comments that were received by the BRA, including public comments from North End residents. So I don't know how they could vote on a project when they don't even know the public's position. And in fact, even today, excuse me, you can talk later on, even today, we don't know what those public comments were. Has the BRA, have you either documented for public consumption or presented at a meeting the issues raised in public comments? And have there been responses to those issues raised either by the BRA or the developer? And I heard earlier, no. And I've also heard, reading between the lines, that there will never be responses to the public comments that were raised on the first filing in the Article 80 process.
I'm happy to share the public comments. We didn't get the requests. In some cases we do, some we don't. We didn't get them, so I'm happy to share them. We never brought it to the board though, so we knew we weren't bringing it to the board.
Doesn't matter.
So we knew there was going to be a second round of public process. We knew we were going to have to bring these guys back out. They would have to be held accountable to what the public was saying. So we knew it wasn't wasn't the end all.
So how will they be held accountable in the next phase of the process for the issues that were raised, the questions, the concerns, and other issues raised in the public comments on the PNF?
They're going to have to listen to the feedback they hear at these meetings.
So they're going to ignore the comments that were submitted in writing so far and only pay attention to oral comments at future meetings. That's what you just said.
Now, we'll take those comments under consideration. We'll take the comments we receive in the future under consideration.
And
What about comments you received in
we've
the
looked at the
past?
comments too, they're not ignored.
We want to know what they were. We wanted, and that's why, for instance, a draft project impact report is so important, because it includes the public comments on the original filing, and it also includes responses to all of those public comments. We'll never have the advantage of that in this process. But let me get on to
I
design.
just want to say one last thing, Dave, which is the public process. We've had a lot of, it's been very public. I mean, this is, and also the three primary elected officials support, and they didn't do this out of, they checked their constituents. Before we went to Munich, we had a full public presentation in Munich. It was very well attended. So I'm just saying, from our standpoint, we're trying to do everything right, okay?
I'm simply
We're
asking
chugging along
you,
here,
I'm asking you
and-
for something very specific.
Sure, I know, but I'm just trying to talk about a couple things you're mentioning about the lack of public process or the lack of feedback from the community. We have a lot of letters that support the project. We have the three elected officials support the project in writing. In fact, as a 10-story and 2-story. We're just trying to make the best project possible. Will we ever satisfy everyone? Probably not.
No, I don't expect you.
But we, as the proponent, we just keep following this process we're being told to do.
Okay,
We're here
on the-
tonight, and you know, we've been to all the other meetings as well. So I just want to make sure that you or others recognize how public it has been, and you know, will continue to be.
On the design height, I think there's a couple of historical perspectives that need to be understood by the public. One is that height of the building, both sections of the building, was probably the primary focus of most of the discussions during the Turnpike Authority, MassDOT process that went on for years. And therefore, you know, this wasn't something, I don't remember it ever being flexible. A lot of public focus went into deciding the appropriate height limits for the hotel part of that building and for the market part of that building. Also, MHC raises in its letter the joint, how do they put it, joint design guidelines, which have nothing to do with the design guidelines that MassDOT put together at the beginning of this public process. They go back even further. Apparently, there was a process that involved a number of agencies, including, I guess, MHC, to come up with that 55 to 65 foot height limit. Now, I actually support a difference in height between sections of the building and some height, you know, height variation. At the same time, though, I think it's important for the public to understand what were the issues that brought it to no more than 55 to 65 feet? What was being protected by that height limit? On the Article 80 process, this is my biggest concern, that we're about to throw away the Article 80 process. We're not going to get comments, we're not going to get responses on the public comments, apparently. The Article 80 process is going to come to an end and is going to be replaced with a PDA process. That's what I'm hearing. My concern with that is that we recently learned from the Government Center garage process that when it goes into a PDA process, it very much narrows the scope of what the public can comment on, the scope of what the BRA is willing to listen to. And with Government Center garage, it was limited to design considerations. Height, density, massing, impacts to transportation, all of that was pushed out by going into the PDA process. So I don't think we're ready to go into this PDA process. I also don't understand why there will be a PDA process for a project like this. This is one parcel of land apparently owned by one entity, MassDOT, And you say that BRA often uses PDAs. I don't believe that statement. I haven't seen that until recently. All of a sudden now, the so-called new BRA is using the PDA process to get through zoning. Whereas before, there was a much more involved public process on the zoning issues, and eventually it was either a variance or it was a zoning amendment to the zoning commission. So I don't like PDAs. Generally, I especially don't understand why it's appropriate for a project of this size on one parcel, and I don't like the fact that when we get into the PDA process, if we do, that the scope of what we're going to be able to comment on and discuss will be much narrower.
I didn't manage Garden Garage, I can't speak to it. I am managing Lewisville, okay? We issued a scoping determination and asked them to respond to the DPIR. We haven't made a determination on what the next steps will be. If we feel the need to issue a scope and ask for a DPIR, we will do so. We have not determined what we're going to do. We're going to let them file this, go through the process, then we're going to determine next steps. Is the site bigger than an acre?
Yes.
If a site is bigger than an acre, it can apply for PDA status. They asked the zoning commission, made it eligible to seek a PDA. Have we decided we're going to grant it to them? No, but they have the right to at least seek it out, go through this process.
But the public
Okay.
doesn't really understand the differences between the two processes. The public doesn't understand why the developer has requested a PDA. What advantage is there to the developer for a PDA designation, and what advantage is there to the public or disadvantage to the public process
I'll be
in
sure.
a PDA designation?
I'll dig up some documents and I'll be sure to articulate to these folks and anybody who comes to this process what a PDA is, why folks seek it, what we seek to approve a PDA, which is an awful lot of public benefits. You need public benefits to be granted that PDA. So you bring up some good questions. I'll be sure to dig some documents that we can share with the public. But again, I just want to reiterate, I apologize that I didn't respond to your comment that you sent. We read every comment letter that comes in. We take it under consideration. There were comment letters we received in support. There were some with concerns on the height. We took it all into consideration. We told these guys, we're not bringing you to the board until we go through the second round of process, which we're committed to doing. We're committed to listening to the neighborhood, seeing how you folks feel, and then we'll determine what the next steps are going to be.
I have one suggestion to make, that when we get back together again, that it not be solely an IAG meeting, because that is, the public should be invited also. The input from the public tonight has been important.
Well, we're going to have an IAG meeting. We're going to publicly advertise it, and they're all going to be invited. How we do it, if you came to the Lewis Wolf meetings, we'll give the IAG first chance to speak. Whatever time is left over to the public, we'll have the opportunity to speak. Then we will have a public meeting that will be publicly advertised, obviously.
Well, I'm suggesting,
It's our requirement to do both, so I think we should stick to both. Are you saying we just don't even do an IAG meeting?
no, I'm making sure that the public is invited to the IAG meeting,
Well,
and that the
absolutely.
public gets the opportunity to provide input.
Absolutely. Okay, any other questions?
Just want to make a comment and compliment the architect on the drawing there. You've stuck to the first law of architectural drawings. Never show an automobile. Never show it, and a truck, absolutely not. That's Hanover Street, I believe.
Yep.
I think I would.
Gee, nice, no traffic.
Please sign in if you did not. That's how I'm going to communicate with you all. Thank you.